Welcome to a Moving Panels One Shot. This is where we have a nerdy little conversation. And today it's a special episode. We have just witnessed the season finale of WandaVision on Disney+. And so I have brought back Chad and Tim. We talked after the premiere of the first two episodes several weeks ago, and now we're going to discuss how the season finale pretty much crushed almost every theory we had, every thought we thought was going to happen with this, except one. We were right about Agnes. So, yay.
Yay for us.
Well, just to start tossing grenades right off the bat, you said season finale. I mean, is it the series finale?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a toss-up I had in my head, too, because I'm like, there's still so much to this story. And but we've got... Clearly, Monica Rambeau's story is going to continue in Secret Invasion. I mean, that was, right. I think, the most obvious setup.
Right.
And then, of course, we think that Wanda's story is going to continue in Multiverse of Madness with Doctor Strange. But then I'm like, but we still got so many other questions, you know.
Right.
Where's White Vision going to come back? Because clearly he's now Vision. I mean, that's obvious.
Right.
He is now Vision.
Well, he did state it, so...
Yeah.
Before he flew off, I am Vision, and bam, gone.
Yeah.
And I mean, I kind of think that it's obvious that this incarnation cannot go any further in the sense that the show that Wanda was making is over. Yeah. So in that sense, like WandaVision, you know, as we were pitched so far, is done. I think the biggest question that I have is, are Wanda and Vision actually going to be together any longer? I mean, not like a rift as in they had a fight and a big breakup or anything, but they seem to end this series in very different places. So I don't know. I don't know where we want to just jump into, you know, everything that we saw. It's kind of, it's pretty
all
overwhelming.
Over the place. So no, I'm with all of that. So I'm wrapping my head around all this too.
Yeah.
So
where
with
do we start?
Vision, let's talk about Vision, because that seems to be where we're at now. So White Vision, and I guess you'd call him Hex Vision. You know, clearly when Hex Vision touched the little chip or whatever you want to say, you see the yellow glow that I assume is as Wanda talked about, it's the piece of the Mind Stone.
Mind Stone.
And so maybe that was, I guess, a piece of the Mind Stone actually entering White Vision, and he regains all of his memories. And so I don't know. I think that did he fly off because now he's got to figure out what his purpose is in life? That was where I was a little confused too, because now he's got all the memories back, and then he turned into, I don't know about y'all, but creepy human-faced Vision. I don't know if it was just the white makeup, but it looked creepier in the white makeup than it does on the purplish reddish makeup that the other Vision has. But I didn't get why he just flies off.
Yeah, I think you were right. It's a processing thing. Like, he clearly was struggling with the argument that I've seen it portrayed more as body and soul, which I thought was very intelligent, between the what did you call it a second ago? Hex Vision and you know, the actual vibranium body of Vision type thing.
Oh, the ship of Theseus thing was genius.
Great.
Yeah,
that was so good. So that fight is epic because, man, it definitely was kind of, I hate using the word roller coaster. It's such a cliche, but you know, you had the physical fight that was going really well, and we had been kind of looking for that action throughout all of WandaVision. I feel like it had been building to this, you know, physical fight that you knew was going to happen, and then to kind of end it in this war of words. At the moment that it was happening, I almost was let down for a second, and then you listen to the argument that the Hex Vision starts to make, and as the two of them like process this together, and you can really tell that they're at this point they're the same thing. They're not in opposition to one another, you know. So it was really kind of cool to see that. The one thing that I wanted to point out with that scene was I don't think that the Hex Vision passed on any of his memories.
No,
I don't think that the Vision that we now have has a memory of being with Wanda in the Hex.
Ooh, I don't
aside
know.
From
I'd have to look back
to kill her.
Yeah, I'd have to look back at all of those flashes you saw. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've only watched it twice so far, but I didn't see any. And you have the fact that Hex Vision even tells the body of Vision, whatever you want to call it, that the memories are still there, that the data is still in his mind, and it's, you know, being a carbon-based AI, it's not easily wiped. So I think all he did was like boop, reboot him, you know, kind of thing, and so I think that part's kind of interesting and made more sense as I dealt with why did White Vision just fly off? Well, for one, he just remembered his own death. Like, you know, I think it was a pretty heavy moment for him, so he had to get out of there for a second. But it is telling that we don't see him again. So,
yeah, I thought that was strange. Yeah.
I want to bring up the fight and talking about his death and whatnot. When they're, you know, flying up in the sky and they're fighting, and the White Vision talks about that Vision has to die, he grabs for the, I guess, Mind Stone, and Vision just phases out. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there going, why didn't you do that when Thanos did it?
Yeah.
He was injured.
I guess.
So, I guess, to add some realty to it. But
yeah, and I guess it's also that when it happened in Infinity War, he realized if he phased out, Thanos would just do something else or kill somebody or, you know, whatnot.
I think he was just that weak. He was already injured and all that sort of stuff. But it's not a bad point. Yeah. But since we're still talking about Vision, that was like, you know what I'm talking about. The only spot that I saw that came directly from the books that I could see was when the White Vision shows up and Wanda goes to talk to him and says, is that you? Mm-hmm. And that's like, except for the background, that's panel for panel out of a mid-90s run of West Coast Avengers, when the White Vision is introduced, and that whole scene was, I mean, shot for shot, just bam, right out of the books, which I thought was cool because it was one of the only things that I think was straight from the books in this show. There was a lot of alluding to the books and a lot of making you think they were going into the books one way or another, but that one was pretty much straight out of it.
We were trolled deep by Marvel.
Oh, no joke.
On this series.
I mean, just the fact that we thought they made us think that the Vision in the Hex was the stolen body of Vision for the longest time. So I really thought it was interesting that of all of the things they could have taken straight from the books, the one thing they did was this touching moment between Wanda. Well, I say between Wanda, is Wanda's feelings for Vision when the purged Vision shows back up without any memory or emotion toward her. So I thought that was kind of cool.
But yeah, I think, like you said, we were trolled from the very beginning. I mean, I think all the theories that we had were completely lost in this. And it doesn't make, I wasn't disappointed by it. I mean, it's great.
No.
I think it was almost like, hey, fooled you. You know, even the whole was the third episode or fourth episode where every question we had been answered, they threw on that whiteboard, almost say like, hey, we know exactly what you guys are thinking. And then even then we were still like, they're, we're playing into their hands. We know exactly, they're going to show us all we want. And so I can't say I was disappointed, but I do like where it's leading us, that it didn't, some things felt like they kind of got wrapped up a little too neatly, but it still left a few open threads that we can go down. My biggest disappointment was that Quicksilver Ralph Boner. Yeah, that he was just a guy. And then I was watching something that supposedly he was the Ralph that Agnes had been referencing all along as her husband.
Right.
So that was the only big disappointment. It's like, you mean he's not connected? That's not our multiverse connection. That's not the other Quicksilver. So that was the only thing I was just like, oh man, you really got me on that one. So
hang on for just a second, though. Sure. I'm still super confused. So they did not patch in, a multiverse. The X-Men connection was not made. So I agree with you 100% on that. But is he just a regular dude? Because Wanda doesn't give anyone else in the Hex any kind of powers. Now, obviously, he was under Agnes's control,
right?
So that's a little bit different. But, I mean, she can just give people Quicksilver powers. So... Yeah, I don't know. I would almost argue, like, is he just a normal dude, or is he somebody we're going to see moving forward?
Well, I would think she would have to give him those powers so that would continue to convince Wanda that that's her brother, so whether he really had the powers
So
or
why
not.
is it Evan Peters? Why was it Evan Peters? Like,
once again, they just want to troll us. Yeah.
Another thing that I thought is possibly interesting that I've heard a theory on this was, is Ralph Boner, is he the witness?
Stop laughing, Chad.
Is he the witness that Jimmy was there for?
Right.
Oh,
Because
right.
that never got answered.
Right.
And does it matter kind of thing. Yeah. That character came out looking pretty good at the end. Jimmy Woo, man, he was the man.
Oh yeah.
So
I definitely, I really hope that the rumors and talk that he's going to get his own series on Disney Plus, I'm all for that.
Was I the only one that loved the callback when he takes the handcuffs off?
And he says flourish.
Flourish.
Yeah.
you remember he's an amateur magician? So
Yeah.
I was like,
exactly.
yes, that's awesome.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed that we didn't get much of Darcy in this episode. That like after she smashes, she traps.
Just like one line.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they're like, oh, she doesn't do debriefing, so she's gone. But they didn't give us any, real closure. But once again, that opens it up for whatever she's going to do next. So, but I enjoyed Darcy a lot in the show, so I was hoping to see a little bit more. Since we didn't get any of them in episode 8, they really didn't get much in this one as well. So, but
she has the best timing ever. Apparently,
it
took her 3 episodes to drive across Westview to make it right in the nick of time.
But if you think about it, they kind of explained it about the fact that she couldn't get through that intersection.
Right.
And so maybe it
Wanda
was when
blocking her.
And then after
Wanda starts to lose
kinda,
control,
and takes down the hex for a brief moment, that probably let her finally get through.
I just like to point out almost MacGuffins. So it was.
Yeah.
But anyways. But I totally agree with you. I'd have loved to see more of Kat Dennings and that character kind of wrapping the thing up. But
all right, so help me understand once again. You guys are much deeper into the comics than I am, but maybe this isn't even comics related. But so at the end, Wanda creates Agnes and just makes her the nosy, quote unquote, nosy neighbor. So she's just leaving her there in Westview, the restored, or like Westview as it was. And she just becomes she's a new neighbor that nobody really knows, and she doesn't know who she is. Is that the whole premise, I guess?
Yeah, I was confused by that too, because it was like, no,
it wasn't just me.
Yeah, it was like, this is your prison now, and then she closes out the hex, and so I'm like, so where is Agnes? Like, does Agnes now exist in the real world, but she's still the character from the hex? Yeah, it's very confused by that.
That's where my money is. I think it was one of those, your metaphorical prison is now the character you created, and so she's just wandering the world as this kooky neighbor, apparently. Right.
But the good nod there is like, the good nod is Agnes is like, you're going to need me. You're going to come back and find me, which of course we're going to see her again in Multiverse of Madness when, there's going to be a time that she needs to know how to use her powers in some way. And so she'll go back and unlock Agnes, I guess. So.
And that's canon too.
Yeah. Directly to that, I also would like to point out that it's twofold when Agnes references the Sorcerer Supreme. So on one hand, it lets you know just how powerful Wanda is. That's the direct reference. But also it's telling you that she knows who Doctor Strange is.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that there might be a connection there later. But like Laramy was saying, also that's out of the books. She becomes a mentor for Wanda. So
right.
I will say, though, of all the theories and all the speculations and whatnot, that's the one that I'm still have trouble with, is where's Doctor Strange? Like, if he is the Sorcerer Supreme, if he is supposed to be kind of the guardian of all things mystical,
right?
Why didn't he show up?
He didn't. Yeah, he's on vacation after Tony Stark's funeral. He's just I don't know.
Yeah, and was I the only one that was expecting to see him in that the final end credit scene in the cabin? Like, I was expecting to see him, break in or show up and be like, "I've got something for you to do." But it was still a good ending scene.
I was expecting one of the sparkly circles whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it.
Oh,
the
yeah.
portal that they
The
make.
portal,
I really kind of thought the way that Marvel Studios loves to just give you a teaser at the end of what's coming. I was expecting to see that color light shine against Wanda's face or something like that, but obviously didn't happen. So back to Laramy earlier pointed out, like the end credits scene. I don't think there are two Wandas. I don't know that I make that stretch too much, but I mean,
so yeah, that was a conversation you and I had right before we started recording.
That's right. Sorry.
Before we recorded, before Tim joined, me and Chad were just quickly talking about that, and my question was: is in that final scene, is that supposed to be Wanda's astral projection that we've seen Doctor Strange do, but of course when Doctor Strange does it, his physical body is asleep? Or does it mean that she's that much more powerful that she can stay awake in both forms? Or is it two different Wandas? Is there our Wanda from this universe, and then... because Agnes does say she awoke something. And then we saw in the previous episode, when she's looking into the Mind Stone, we see the silhouette of the Scarlet Witch. So is it that we have Wanda and we have the Scarlet Witch, and they're two different entities?
Yeah, I had I had those thoughts as well. I mean, I was thinking, my first thought was, oh, that's the Scarlet Witch in the projection, and then Wanda, they're separate. And the Scarlet Witch is like learning more to become more powerful. But then I went back to Doctor Strange, like, well, that's what Doctor Strange did. I didn't think back that he only does that when he's asleep. But that does make sense that if she's more powerful, that, you know, her normal body could be doing mundane things. I mean, all she's doing is sitting on a stoop and then walking around the cabin. It's not like she was operating heavy machinery or anything. But so yeah, I had those same thoughts, and I guess we'll find that out in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness.
We better. Like, that's
yeah, exactly.
That's all I want to know. Back to the cabin really quick. This is just a little side thing. One, I don't know if you paid any attention, but when Wanda stands up to go back into the cabin, you see runes all around the door.
Nerds.
Yeah,
of course we paid attention. Yeah. Come on,
but then I also had another question. As they're swooping into the cabin, I'm going, is that the same cabin that Bruce Banner was hiding out in the Avengers movie?
I thought about that. I don't think so. He was in like Thailand or something, and this was pretty, I would guess, Scandinavia. Very, very much the North Woods, not a tropical area. So
yeah.
But yeah, I thought the same thing. The runes are kind of interesting too, and maybe I'm just totally jumping the shark here, but they're also very like Nordic runes. So does this tie in at all with, you know, Thor's demigod religion, that sort of thing? I don't know. Again, maybe I'm just jumping it all together, but they seem very Nordic, and so that was actually my first thought when it zooms in on her walking into the cabin. I was just like, oh, okay, so they're just diving deep into the "this is Norway" thing, and then of course I was like, or it has to do with the runes that the witches use to secure a place, that kind of thing. But I don't know that those two things are detached, is I guess what I'm trying to get at.
I admit though, I don't know if I was just so invested when I was watching it the first time around, but when they're fighting, when Wanda and Agnes are fighting and she's throwing her magic, and you see the ones that are missing and hitting the hex to then reveal that she's been throwing the runes onto the hex. That was just a great reveal for me. Loved it.
It was genius.
Yeah.
And so the second time, I don't know how many times you've had a chance to watch it yet, but the second time I watched it, I was looking for the runes to show as she's hitting, because I knew what's happening. I know the reveal, and it doesn't at all. Like, there's no giveaway to that.
Yeah.
So because I was like, I'm gonna feel really punked if I missed that part of it too, But they didn't go that bad. But that was a fantastic. Did you see that coming at all?
No, I didn't.
I mean, I knew there was gonna have to be something where, obviously, because they had already hinted at the, I don't know if you call it her crown type thing. So I knew there was going to be something where all of a sudden her power would get stronger. But that to me was a beautiful little reveal of Wanda.
Well, and in Marvel Studios' classic fashion, they had been telling you that the entire episode, that it was going to come down to that she had learned something from Agatha. So, because there's so much banter, like when you see it in hindsight about like, oh, it isn't your strength, it's your knowledge, and all these little statements that they're making throughout the whole thing, and then you get to the end and you're like, yeah, you were setting us up for this the entire time. But, it's so stinking good. Those writers are so ridiculous. To write in as many rabbit trails as they did to make us all go, oh, it's Mephisto. Oh, it's here comes the multiverse and all this other stuff. You want to just give them a clap for a second. Yeah, it's ridiculously well written, as is most of the Marvel stuff. But so I don't know about you guys, but I totally don't understand the vitriol online about it one way or the other. People hating it for it being way too slow to start, which that one I at least kind of understand, versus people at the end just being like, why did you backtrack into standard Marvel stuff? And I'm just going, well, apparently can't make anybody happy, but they made me happy. I loved it.
Oh yeah.
And I saw a lot of that with the, they do this great build up and this, and then they just have CGI fights in the final episode. I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted. Like,
if they didn't do that, somebody would have complained. So it's like you're not gonna, like Chad said, you're not gonna please everybody. So don't even worry about it. So
if anything,
and what did those people want? Just like an MMA fight between Catherine Hahn and Elizabeth Olsen? I mean,
look, they do realize that the entire end of Endgame is also a CGI fight, right? They do realize that.
No joke. So crazy.
I will admit, though, even though we got to have a cool little moment with Monica as Photon, I would have liked to seen a little bit more of her power.
Yeah, I think that once again, that's another. They're just opening that up for Captain Marvel for her to kind of just she's just discovering her power. I don't think she knows who she is yet. I think she's still figuring all that out.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Tim. To play devil's advocate, I would have felt it would have cheated her character. Yeah, it would have cheated her character if she would have been like, she would have joined in the fight and really did anything. But yeah,
I'm not necessarily saying that she should have joined in the fight, but more of like when she steps in front of Haywood's bullets. I mean, clearly that was reaction. Like she was just protecting the children. She didn't know that her body was going to absorb the bullets and all. And so I just wanted a few more scenes of just like, almost like her powers just being a reaction to what is happening, just a little bit more to that. The one that fair,
it was 37 minutes. We wanted a few more scenes of a lot of stuff. So let's be honest.
Well, because even the thing with Ralph Boner,
you just want to keep saying his name, don't you?
Yeah.
I love Evan Peters' reaction to the inside joke when he turns around Boner.
Yeah,
it's so funny.
But the fact that how is she controlling you? And then it almost seemed like she knew how to use that power to see the power that's reflecting off the necklace.
Right.
But speaking of knowing how to use powers, Wiccan, I forget which one's which, Billy and Tommy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw in the Halloween episode that he was getting the visions in his head of what was happening. But when did he know he could throw magic? Like, that seemed like he knew it, because he immediately is like, stance and blue mysticism coming out of his hand.
Yeah. So. Yeah, those kids, that was one of the theories that I thought was kind of clear cut going forward. They being Marvel Studios, has already released pictures of Hawkeye's daughter taking the mantle up. And if you look at the comics, Wiccan and Speed are part of the new Avengers along with her. So I was like, well, this is a clear inroad. They're going to get us ready for the new Avengers. So, where are these kids now?
Oh, they're somewhere, because we hear them in the end credit scene.
But is that just memory? Is that her still being tortured by previous events? Because that isn't new. What's the word I'm looking for? That isn't new audio footage. That was from when the other witch. Does she have a title other than Agnes in this series? Agatha. So when Agatha has the kids, when Agatha Harkness has the kids, that was a line from that. So is this her just memory, or is she trying to create them now that she knows she can? Like, is she trying to figure that out? That's more what I got, in the sense of, I don't think that those kids are around anymore. Just like that Vision isn't around anymore. So I don't know. My wife had a problem with that scene, by the way. She was like, why wouldn't you bring the whole family into the living room, like to live out the last few moments? And I don't know. The only thing I could kind of come up with was she knew that the kids were purely dreamt up, that they were purely her wishful imagination of the life she could have had, whereas Vision was not. He was something that was she had created from reality. So she kind of had to finish up her time with him. But
well, and I also think it was part of that, because when we see her bringing down the hex and they collapse on the street and they're jigsaw puzzling away, they seem to be in agony, in pain. And so I think it was we're going to put you to sleep, so that way when it happens, maybe they're not aware of it.
Feel it.
And then also I think it's Wanda coming to that closure of, I know I have to let you go, but I'd rather not watch it happen.
No, I agree with you. So was I the only one that had just a second of, wait a minute, did they just fool us in the sense that this whole thing had been in Wanda's mind, when it zooms out and it's the same just foundation of a house that she had started the whole thing with, and her car's just there for a second, and there's nothing else. There's none of the other pieces of machinery or the, not tanks, but you know what I mean, the military vehicles that had rolled into town. For just a half second, I was like, wait a minute, did the whole thing just happen in her head? But then of course you see the other characters, and I was like, because I thought we'd been hardcore pumped for about a half second there. But
and that's another thing. The people of Westview, when they wake up, obviously they're just staring at Wanda because they see Wanda as the villain. Mm-hmm. Here's the part that really got me, was when, I can't think of the character's name, but Emma Caulfield is the actress. When Agnes wakes her up and she pleads with Wanda and she talks about she just wants to see her child.
Oh, Dottie, yeah.
Yeah, and she just wants to hold her child. And I'm going back to those episodes in the season where like Vision realized, where are all the children? And of course we then see them in the next episode in the Halloween, but we even see in that episode, we see like a child crying while they're frozen. Like we see the tear running down their cheek. And that took me back to what we joked about in those first two episodes when they had the chant saying, "For the children." Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the "for the children" thing, I think that was another rabbit trail where we were just misled, because there was I saw a lot of theories online. I didn't come up with this one on my own at all, but the whole, trope of witches that eat kids and all this kind of stuff. So there was a fan theory that was moving on that Agnes was there for the twins, that was her end goal, to somehow steal them, which of course, didn't pan out to be true. So I think that was another thing that we were just kind of thrown a little bit of a loop for, but it did fade away. That is kind of funny. I hadn't thought about that. But also, it wasn't a kid that was crying in the Halloween Spooktacular episode. It was the lady that was putting up laundry, but her family's in the yard. Like you see her husband also glitching, like doing the exact same thing and everything. So I think the emotional impact was there, but it wasn't the torment of like watching a child, crying or anything. So, but anyways,
but maybe it was her seeing her child and realizing she can't be with her child at that moment.
And that whole thing makes the scene later with Evan Peters, when Wanda and him are kind of breaking down what she's doing, makes it even a little more poignant when he points out, like, hey, so I get it. You were trying to do the ethical thing. They're just at home kind of deal. And it's creepy, man, when you really go back and look at it. So I like that they still kept that Wanda wasn't absolved of what she had done, that people hated her. Like they made it very clear when she walks through town at the end of the episode, these people hate her guts. For good reason. You wouldn't just be like, oh, she's still a hero. It was just a mistake. Like, if that was you and your family, nah, man, like she's not cool anymore. So I thought that was a cool scene.
Yeah. Once again, I think it still sets up her. It's still keeping her as a villain. If this was all once again helping to set up her being the villain for Multiverse of Madness, it couldn't end with a like, oh, we love you, Wanda. Thank you for removing the hex. No, they're like, thanks for removing the hex, but we're not we're not cool because we were all imprisoned in your little game for however long it was. And so, yeah, she definitely didn't leave as a hero from Westview at all.
I want to throw in something that I remembered from, I can't remember if it was episode 8. It was the episode where, I think it was episode 8, where Wanda enters Westview and we see all of these people before the Hex. Miss Hart. Do you get the impression that Mr. Hart was actually dead and that she was a grieving widow?
You never see that actor again.
Yeah,
I
thought
thought the same thing.
Yeah, that popped in my head last night. I was like, we've seen all these other people that have popped up, but he never came back. I didn't think beyond that, but it's like, I wonder why he isn't in this, last episode to see who he actually was. So that is a good question.
Because when Wanda entered Westview, she's sitting there alone and looks depressed when she's sitting at that table. And even when the hex is lifted and you see her walking towards, she looks like a distraught woman. And I want to tie that back into the first episode when he's dying in front of her. I remember making this comment when we did the reaction to those first episodes that she looked like, she's laughing, but her face
crying.
Yeah.
No, I thought the same thing, and I think that's a cool parallel because Wanda is a grieving widow at the beginning of the show. So does she bring this woman in because in a twisted way, even at the end, Wanda is sort of trying to justify to herself that she was helping these people.
Yeah, that she was making them happy.
Yeah. So does she bring in this other grieving widow as a way of, she thinks, trying to help her, which was clearly painful to this lady in the long run? But no, I agree with you. I thought the exact same thing. I did not go back and see when they first show up in Westview and she's sitting on a bench like that, but that makes perfect sense. But I thought it was pretty poignant. A lot of interesting stuff wrapped up in that. Back to circle back just a second to what Tim was saying. I think it's kind of funny because you just said, is Wanda the villain for Multiverse of Madness? And that's another thing that Laramy and I were like, just kind of wandering through before the podcast started. I kind of think she is. I think at the end of the episode, you get that post-credit scene. She's reading the Darkhold. They made a point earlier of telling you it's the Book of the Damned. It's like, I kind of think they're painting her. And she made the comment, when Rambo is trying to talk to her and, don't let Hayward paint you the villain. And she goes, maybe I am. And so I don't know. Marvel clearly wants you to think this, and we would be stupid to take anything at face value post WandaVision. But
and I think there was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Agnes make some comment about when she's becoming, or when she's realized she's a Scarlet Witch, that you're unleashing something you don't understand? And is there like a prophecy in there about Scarlet Witch that maybe Agnes is alluding that she's going to become like a greater villain down the line? At least that's kind of how I read it. So. Yeah,
no, she makes a comment. Gosh, what is it? I'm trying to remember more or less verbatim what she says, but she basically says that the Scarlet Witch destroys the world.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get to.
Prophecy from the Darkhold.
Right.
But
and that goes back to my theory about, is it possible that this is kind of like I hate to use this connection, but kind of like a Dark Phoenix kind of story where the Scarlet Witch is actually possessing Wanda.
Yeah, and I had that thought too.
And so again, going back to that, the two versions of Wanda, will it be the Scarlet Witch who is the actual villain, but Wanda is is not? Wanda's just a victim of this.
Yeah, so my wife and I were actually discussing that last night, because when at that point where she's kind of becoming the Scarlet Witch and the little headdress thing is starting to appear on her head, my wife was like, oh, she's becoming that lady that she saw when she was in the Strucker's lab. And I was like, oh, so that made me go back to what you were saying is, did the Scarlet Witch possess her at that moment, and Wanda really didn't know who she was? She just had these powers and was kind of learning to control them, not realizing that she's not the Scarlet Witch. The Scarlet Witch possessed her in that moment, which is once again why the workers at the lab, they couldn't see that. They only, like that, when they're going back and watching that video on that episode, it like glitches and you see her standing and then she falls, or whatever that little scene is, or whatever. So I had that same thought that Wanda is Wanda and the Scarlet Witch is a totally different supernatural being that has taken over Wanda, and will that the separation of those two be what we see going forward?
So riding on that, I'm going to throw out a pretty out there theory that it's obviously going to take movies and movies to prove whether or not I'm right here. But is Marvel turning the stones into actual characters? So because you saw it a little tiny bit in Endgame and Infinity War, where the Soul Stone seems to sort of have this will of who will possess it, and that sort of thing. So it was kind of personified just a little bit. And then in WandaVision, we get for lack of a better term, a character that has been trapped in the stone or is part of the stone, that sort of thing. And they sort of sideways explain to you that's why the Vision is who he is, because of the character of the Mind Stone is also part of his character. So as we move into crazy things like the Eternals, are the stones going to be revealed as, beings in and of themselves? And, moving forward, would they be good or bad? Like that would be a very interesting question.
Yeah. But it's a cool way to evolve that story for sure, instead of just abandoning the stones altogether and going for something else. I think that's pretty smart. I'd watch that.
So I think we can kind of wrap this up. It's kind of where I wanted to go is, all right, now what? What is there to come? We got Winter Soldier coming in a couple of weeks, Falcon and Winter Soldier. Does this continue that story? Does it start another story? The Darkhold, going back to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We talked about Scarlet Witch possibly being the villain. Could they? Because, they did, my mind just went blank. Dormammu, how do you pronounce his name?
Dormammu, yeah.
Yeah, they did him in the first Doctor Strange movie. So could they bring Chthon, who wrote the Darkhold, could they be bringing him in? And also, because when they showed that book in Agatha's lair, dungeon, whatever you want to call it, I did go, is that supposed to be the Darkhold? Because my recollection of the Darkhold is from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it was a completely different looking book. And so now I'm going, and I think we may have talked about this in some other previous episode. Me and Chad talked about it in some episode. Is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. canon? Or did they just completely wipe out that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is canon?
They haven't referenced it anymore, so I would think that's not canon. That would be my guess.
Which, getting very meta outside, like not in the universe, is very weird that you would use one TV show to kind of push out the previous TV show of Marvel Studios.
Yeah.
But, anyways.
Yeah.
Well,
no, I think there's a little internal confusion at Marvel there.
Yeah, well, because people probably aren't as familiar with the Runaways, but the Darkhold showed up in that show too. Now, I don't think that is canon, just like the Cloak and Dagger show I don't think was canon. So I'm not with that, but Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. started off canon. Right. And then apparently, and I don't know if it's also supposed to be that, because at the end of the season that the Darkhold was featured, which also had Ghost Rider in it, when Ghost Rider gets the Darkhold and he takes it essentially back to hell, is it that Agnes got a hold of it and maybe the Darkhold, transformed in some way, depending on who possesses it? I don't know. But I'm getting back away from what I originally wanted to start off with. Where is this headed? Like, where do you think Falcon and Winter Soldier's going? Where do you think these characters show back up? That's kind of where we started talking about with Vision and all. Like, where do you think all of this is headed? Because this was clearly, even though we thought that we were going to get all these answers at the end, this series was clearly just to kick off Phase 4.
I think you have that group of characters that are going to not wrap up, that's not the right word, but continue the story of the Earth people. And then you have clearly Monica Rambeau, Captain Marvel, the Thor movie that's being made that's moving things into this like cosmic realm. And I think magic is going to get tied up with that. So I think the mysticism side, so Wanda, Doctor Strange, all those characters are going to kind of go one way, I feel like. And I think Spider-Man is the next big production on the other kind of half of things, and those characters. So I think that the Falcon Winter Soldier series we're about to get is going to lean more into the future of Spider-Man than Doctor Strange, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
trying to answer that question.
Yeah, I was going to say somewhat similar. I think WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier is going to be two completely polar opposite type of shows, and not really trying to continue a same story. Now, there may be like little Easter eggs that, as Marvel tends to do, they'll drop little pieces for the overarching story that they're going to eventually tell, but they'll probably be so small that we won't really recognize them now. We'll figure them out later. But I think that's smart, Chad, to think that this is probably going to tie more into Spider-Man than Doctor Strange. So I'm curious to see where it goes. But Falcon and Winter Soldier, yeah, I don't really see this storyline, the WandaVision storyline, in any way showing up in that show at all. And even if it does, it'll be just minor references, kind of like going back to your Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. The first couple of seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they would reference things that were happening among the movies. But I think what I understand from that was the movie production thing was moving at such a pace that the TV realm couldn't keep up, or they were making changes that for the TV production they couldn't adjust it, so they just completely split from not being kind of part of that universe and try to tell their own different stories. So I would say at least the last few seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. were not canon. The first two
they were also
probably
bad.
Still. Yeah,
I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah, I gave up. Ghost Rider season is when I gave up. I tried. I didn't stay with it.
I have never even finished season 6 and haven't watched season 7.
Yeah.
So
I'm surprised it made it to 7 seasons, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Okay. So we're thinking. So we got Falcon and Winter Soldier that will start in a couple of weeks. That'll tie into Spider-Man 3 is what our prediction is right now. Whether or not we decide to come back, whether or not we decide to come back and do an episode for Falcon and Winter Soldier, we'll see. Yeah. Then you got the Loki show, which possibly, as Chad's mentioning, could tie into the Thor Love and Thunder movie. And then, because I don't know what the dates are around those two. And I mean, clearly it was pretty much confirmed. This is going into Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness. Monica Rambeau's story is clearly going into the Secret Invasion series that'll come in a couple of years.
Which will have to tie into Captain Marvel 2 as well. And then...
Man, they're just setting it up to take all of your money. That's just all. No,
it's worked so far.
So also, don't sleep on the making ofs that are coming out in between the series. I am very curious next Friday to see if any of our questions that we're throwing out today are going to get answered, or at least kind of theories confirmed moving forward or something like that. It'll be pretty interesting to see how much of a hand Disney tips a little bit with these making ofs, because they've made a fairly big deal out of them. Yeah. So I don't know. It could just be filler so that they keep you on a watch us every Friday track, but who knows?
Yeah, I'm hoping it's just not a bunch of rehash of the season, that they'll actually show us some real behind the scenes
like
stuff.
The Marvel Legends show.
Yeah. Bring that up too.
Which they're I think they just released the ones for Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yeah, I saw that.
I'm making air quotes here. Did you see that they accidentally dropped that early? Like, I was like, yeah, right. It seems like a lot of what Disney does is accidental for sure.
All right, so let's do this. I mean, it's not an official episode or whatnot, but and I don't know if I'll ever do an official episode of this entire series, because I think we've kind of hashed it out a good bit. As Chad mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of comic book connection that we haven't mentioned in these in the initial episode, and then of course in this finale reaction show. So let's go ahead. Let's do it right now. For the entire series, all 9 episodes, in the tradition of a traditional Moving Panels episode, do you bag it, stack it, or trade it?
I would bag this one. I think, even though we were fooled pretty much, I think I enjoyed being fooled. It was fun, and it's the first real Marvel Studios series where just I would trade Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for sure, but this being the first foray into the TV coming off of the movies, I think it was the same quality of the movies, story wise, special effects, acting, all that. So yeah, I'd bag it. It's definitely worth holding on to for sure.
I feel exactly the same. I'd bag it for sure. And I even commented on a couple of groups on social media, basically the exact same sentiment. Like, I didn't feel cheated at all that we got misdirected. I feel like that was the genius of this project, was just getting to the end to then be like, oh man, you guys did do something I didn't see coming, and completely misled me the entire time on the other direction. So I loved it. I would for sure bag it.
I'm also under the side of bag it. However, I gotta admit that when I initially said we were gonna review these, part of my brain did go to stack it, and here's why. I enjoyed it watching it the way we watched it, week to week.
Oh yeah.
To where we got all of those theories, and we were speculating, and we wanted to know what would happen next and what would happen next. What I'm thinking, even though as a comic book nerd, I might rewatch it to see if I can see some stuff I didn't see the first time around now that I know the outcome. But at the same time, I'm not going to enjoy it in the same way because I already now know everything. It's like it's like the murder mystery. You might watch it again to see if there was a way you could have figured some of it out, but it's not as good on a second viewing. And that's where I teeter. So I'm going to say bag it, but I'm at like maybe the bottom of bag it right before you would go to stack it. So that's my initial thought, but I totally agree. I'm excited to see where else we're going, because I think Falcon and Winter Soldier was supposed to actually be released before WandaVision. Then, of course, the pandemic stuff caused the change. So I'm very curious. Obviously, it won't have a connection, but very curious as to what was their initial plan, if that was going to be what aired first. So I'm excited about it.
It was also going to be around, a little on the heels of Black Widow, which we're still waiting to see. So that's its own other conundrum.
Yeah, which we can't say has any connection.
Yeah, it's a prequel. Yeah, I mean, it'll come out in 2025, and we'll all be impressed. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, guys, for joining me on this special episode. We are going to release this along with another one-shot because we are doing our month of Justice League. And we will be back. Blake, hopefully, will also join us when the Snyder Cut, Zack Snyder's Justice League, airs in just a few weeks. And so we hope you all tune in for that. But thank you, Tim and Chad, for joining me on this trip through WandaVision.
Thank you.
All right, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
Hello, movie viewers and fellow movie lovers. My name is Tim Williams, and I'm the creator and host of Movie Views Presents the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. See, I love the 80s, and I have a great appreciation and nostalgic passion for the classic 80s flicks that birthed my love for movies and ultimately helped shape my childhood. On each episode, I'll discuss, with a special guest co-host of course, a different film from the 1980s. We'll share memories, favorite characters, iconic scenes, and even share some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. We'll discuss famous blockbusters like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Coming to America, Ghostbusters, Dirty Dancing, Top Gun, Die Hard, and many, many more. As well as some other cult classics and even lesser-known flicks we discovered on cable TV or the now-defunct video rental stores. Remember those? No matter what 80s flick we choose to talk about, we'll always have a good time, so come and check us out. You can find the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast on major podcasting platforms like Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and more. Be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss a single episode. Once again, I'm Tim Williams, and I hope you'll join me for the next 80s Flick Flashback.